The scream tore through the frozen silence before it died in her throat, and Grace Emerson's legs buckled beneath her, as the world tilted sideways into a field of white that stretched endlessly in every direction. The pain in her swollen belly had been building for hours, sharp and insistent, but now it consumed everything, dragging her down into the snow that fell thick and relentless from the iron-gray sky above Montana territory. She had been walking for 2 days since the stagecoach broke an axle 15 miles outside of Helena, and the driver had taken the only horse to ride for help, leaving her and 3 other passengers huddled in the broken coach. But when the blizzard came howling down from the mountains that morning, the others had panicked and scattered, and Grace had followed what she thought was the road. Her thin coat pulled tight around her pregnant form, her dead husband's wedding ring cold against her chest, where she wore it on a chain. Now, as darkness crept into the edges of her vision and the snow soaked through her skirts, she thought of James, buried 3 months ago after a mining accident in Virginia City, and wondered if she would join him before their child ever took a breath. The cold stopped feeling cold after a while, replaced by a strange warmth that made her want to sleep, to simply close her eyes and let the snow cover her like a blanket. She pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the flutter of movement beneath her palm, and tried to hold onto consciousness, but it slipped away like water through her fingers. Her last coherent thought was a prayer, not for herself, but for the baby, that somehow God would see fit to spare this innocent life even if he chose to take hers. Isaac Norton had been riding the high country for 3 days, searching for strays from his herd that had wandered up into the hills before the storm hit. He ran cattle on 2,000 acres south of Helena, land he had worked and saved for years to buy, building his ranch from nothing with his own hands and the help of a few loyal men. At 26, he had achieved more than most men twice his age, but the success meant little when he returned each night to an empty house, eating alone, sleeping alone, living a life that felt incomplete despite all he had accomplished. The blizzard had caught him by surprise, coming down hard and fast the way Montana storms did, and he had been about to turn back when he spotted something dark against the white expanse ahead, a shape that did not belong to the landscape. He urged his horse forward, squinting through the driving snow, and his heart lurched when he realized it was a person, a woman lying motionless in the snow, already half buried by the accumulation. Isaac was off his horse before he fully registered the decision, dropping to his knees beside her and brushing the snow from her face. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with delicate features now pale as death, her lips tinged blue with cold. He pressed his fingers to her neck, searching for a pulse, and felt the faint flutter of her heartbeat, slow but steady. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by urgency as he took in her condition, the unmistakable swell of her belly visible even beneath her sodden coat and dress. "Madam," he said, his voice rough against the howl of the wind. "Madam, can you hear me?" She did not respond, her body limp and unresponsive, and Isaac knew he had only minutes to act. The cold would kill her if he did not get her warm, and the nearest shelter was his line cabin, a small structure he maintained for situations exactly like this, though he had never imagined finding a pregnant woman dying in the snow when he built it. He shrugged out of his heavy coat and wrapped it around her, then lifted her into his arms, surprised by how light she felt despite her condition. Her head lolled against his chest, and he could feel the shallow rise and fall of her breathing, each breath a small miracle. Getting her onto his horse took effort and careful maneuvering, but Isaac managed to settle into the saddle with her cradled against him, her body tucked close to his for warmth. He guided the horse with his knees, one arm locked around the woman to hold her secure, the other hand gripping the reins. The wind tore at them, and the snow fell so thick he could barely see 10 feet ahead. But Isaac knew this country like he knew his own name, could navigate it blind if necessary. The cabin was 3 miles northeast, 3 miles that felt like 30 as he pushed through drifts that came up to the horse's chest, the animal laboring beneath the double burden. "Hold on," he murmured against her hair, though he knew she could not hear him. "Just hold on, I've got you. You're safe now." The words became a mantra, repeated over and over as he rode, as much to reassure himself as her. He had seen men die from exposure, had watched the light fade from their eyes as the cold claimed them, and he refused to let that happen to this woman, this stranger who had stumbled into his path, for reasons he could not begin to understand. The minutes stretched into an hour, then longer, his arms aching from holding her, his body numb with cold now that he had given her his coat. Ice formed in his beard and eyebrows, and his fingers felt like wood on the reins, but he did not stop, did not slow, driving forward with grim determination. When the cabin finally materialized through the curtain of snow, a dark square against the white, Isaac could have wept with relief. He dismounted carefully, taking the woman with him, and kicked the door open, carrying her inside. The cabin was small, just one room with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed, a table and 2 chairs, but it was shelter, protection from the killing wind. He laid her on the bed and immediately set about building a fire, his frozen fingers fumbling with the kindling he kept stacked beside the hearth. The wood caught, flames licking upward, and he fed it until a proper blaze roared in the fireplace, heat beginning to radiate into the small space. Only then did he turn his attention back to the woman, and his stomach clenched with fear at what he saw. She had not moved, had not made a sound, her skin still that terrible pale color, her lips still blue. Isaac had doctored injured cattle, had set broken bones on his ranch hands, but this was beyond his experience, beyond anything he knew how to handle. He stripped off her wet coat and dress with hands that shook, not from cold but from the enormity of what he was attempting, trying to preserve her modesty even as he recognized the urgency of the situation. Her undergarments were soaked through, and he removed those as well, wrapping her in every blanket he could find, piling them on until only her face was visible. He chafed her hands and feet, trying to restore circulation, and checked her pulse again, relieved to find it slightly stronger than before. The baby, he realized with a jolt, he had no idea if the baby was all right, had no way of knowing. The thought terrified him in a way that surprised him with its intensity. This woman, this child, they were strangers, nothing to him, and yet he found himself desperately invested in their survival as if his own life depended on it. "Come on," he said, his voice rough. "Come back, don't give up. Rest now, you're safe. I promise you're safe." Grace surfaced slowly from the darkness, aware first of warmth, blessed warmth that seeped into her bones and chased away the terrible cold. Then came pain, a deep ache in her limbs and a sharper discomfort in her belly, and finally sound, the crackle of a fire and the low rumble of a man's voice speaking words she could not quite make out. Her eyelids felt heavy, weighted, but she forced them open, blinking against the firelight that seemed too bright after so long in the gray. A face swam into focus above her, masculine and concerned, with dark eyes that widened when they met hers. He had a strong jaw covered in dark stubble, and his hair was brown, almost black, hanging past his collar. He was young, perhaps only a few years older than she, and handsome in a rough, weathered way that spoke of a life lived outdoors. "Thank God," he breathed, and the relief in his voice was so palpable that Grace felt tears prick her eyes. "I thought I'd lost you. How do you feel? Can you speak?" Grace opened her mouth, but her throat was too dry, the words sticking. The man seemed to understand, and he reached for something beside the bed, returning with a tin cup of water. He slipped his hand behind her head, supporting her as he brought the cup to her lips, and she drank gratefully, the water cool and clean. "Slowly," he cautioned. "Not too much at once." When she had drunk her fill, he lowered her head back to the pillow, and Grace finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Where am I?" "Line cabin on my ranch about 12 miles south of Helena," he said. "I'm Isaac Norton. I found you in the snow about 3 miles from here. You were nearly frozen to death." The memories came flooding back, the blizzard, the endless walking, the moment when she had fallen and known she could not get up again. Grace's hand moved instinctively to her belly and fresh panic surged through her. "The baby," she gasped. "Is the baby all right?" Isaac's expression shifted, uncertainty crossing his features. "I don't know," he admitted. "I'm not a doctor. But I felt the baby move while I was getting you warm. So that's a good sign, isn't it?" Grace pressed her hand more firmly against her abdomen, concentrating, and after a moment she felt it, the flutter of movement that had become familiar over the past months. Tears spilled down her cheeks, tears of relief so profound it left her shaking. "Yes," she managed, "the baby's moving. That's good." Isaac exhaled, his shoulders sagging as if a great weight had been lifted. "You gave me quite a scare, madam. I've never been so glad to find a pulse in my life." "What were you doing out there?" "Where were you headed?" "Helena," Grace said. "I was trying to get to Helena. The stagecoach broke down and then the storm came and everyone scattered. I thought I was following the road, but I must have gotten turned around." She paused, fresh tears threatening. "I thought I was going to die out there. I thought my baby was going to die." "You're safe now," Isaac said, his voice gentle but firm. "The storm's still raging out there, but you're safe in here. No one's dying, not on my watch." There was such conviction in his words, such absolute certainty, that Grace found herself believing him. She studied his face, taking in the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the way his clothes were damp and his hair matted with melted snow. "You must have ridden through the storm to bring me here," she said slowly. "You could have died yourself." Isaac shrugged, but there was something in his expression, a flicker of emotion. He quickly shuddered. "Couldn't very well leave you there, could I? Besides, I know this country. I've ridden through worse storms." That last part was a lie, and they both seemed to know it, but Grace did not call him on it. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate for what he had done, for the life he had saved, 2 lives. "I don't know how to thank you properly. You saved us." "No thanks necessary," Isaac said, standing abruptly as if uncomfortable with her gratitude. "You should rest. You've been through an ordeal and you need to regain your strength. There's food if you're hungry and water. I'll keep the fire going." Grace wanted to protest, wanted to say something more, but exhaustion pulled at her, dragging her back toward sleep. Her eyes drifted closed, and this time when the darkness came, it was not frightening but welcoming, a natural rest that her body desperately needed. When she woke again, the quality of light in the cabin had changed, softer now, the gray light of either dawn or dusk, she could not tell which. The fire still crackled in the hearth, and Isaac sat at the small table, working on something with his hands. Grace watched him for a moment, studying the way his fingers moved with practiced ease, mending what looked like a leather bridle. He had changed into dry clothes, and his hair was combed back from his face, and there was something peaceful about the domestic scene, something that made her chest ache with a loneliness she usually kept buried deep. "How long did I sleep?" she asked, and Isaac's head jerked up, his eyes finding hers immediately. About 6 hours, he said, setting aside his work. It's evening now, nearly dark. How do you feel? Grace considered the question. Her body ached and her belly felt tight and uncomfortable, but the deep, bone-chilling cold was gone, replaced by genuine warmth. Better, she said. Sore but better. Is the storm still going? Isaac nodded toward the single window where snow pressed against the glass, blocking out most of the light. Worse than before, if anything. We're not going anywhere for at least another day, maybe two. Your ranch, Grace said, fresh worry sparking. Won't people be concerned? Won't they wonder where you are? My foreman knows I went looking for strays and knows to wait out the storm, Isaac said. He'll figure I holed up somewhere. It's you people will be worried about. Were you traveling alone? The question, innocent enough, still made Grace's throat tighten. Yes, she said quietly. I'm alone. There's no one expecting me in Helena, no one who will worry if I don't arrive. Something shifted in Isaac's expression, a flicker of sadness or perhaps understanding. The baby's father, he asked, then immediately shook his head. I'm sorry, that's not my business. Forget I asked. He's dead, Grace said, the words flat, emotionless, because if she let any feeling into them she would break. My husband, James. He died 3 months ago in a mining accident in Virginia City. I'm a widow. The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. Isaac did not offer empty condolences or meaningless platitudes, and Grace was grateful for that. She had heard enough "I'm sorry for your loss" to last a lifetime, words that meant nothing, that could not bring James back or change the fact that she was alone and pregnant with nowhere to go. I'm sorry, Isaac said finally, and somehow when he said it, it sounded genuine, not perfunctory. That must be incredibly difficult, especially with the baby coming. I was going to Helena to find work, Grace continued, not sure why she was telling him all this, only knowing that she needed to talk, needed to say the words aloud. James left some debts I didn't know about, and I sold everything we had to pay them off. I thought maybe I could find a position as a housekeeper or a cook, something to earn money until the baby comes. After that, I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. Isaac was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel exposed, seen in a way she had not been in months. What's your name? He asked finally. Grace, she said. Grace Emerson. Grace, he repeated as if testing the word. It suits you. You're very brave, Grace Emerson, to have survived what you did, to be facing what you're facing alone. I'm not brave, Grace said, her voice breaking slightly. I'm terrified. I have no idea what I'm doing or how I'm going to manage. I wake up every morning and I'm scared, and I go to sleep every night and I'm still scared, and I don't know how to make it stop. The admission surprised her, the honesty of it, the raw vulnerability. She had not said those words to anyone, had barely allowed herself to think them. But something about Isaac, about this situation, had cracked open the careful walls she had built around her fear, and now it spilled out, unstoppable. Isaac crossed to the bed and crouched beside it, bringing himself to her eye level. I can't promise the fear will go away, he said quietly. But I can promise you're not alone, not right now. Whatever happens, however long this storm lasts, you have someone looking out for you. You have me. The words should not have meant as much as they did. She barely knew this man, had been conscious in his presence for perhaps an hour total. But Grace felt something shift inside her chest, some frozen piece of her heart cracking and beginning to thaw, and she reached out without thinking, her hand finding his where it rested on the edge of the bed. His fingers were warm, calloused, strong, and they closed around hers with a gentleness that made her want to cry. Thank you, she whispered. Isaac squeezed her hand once, then released it and stood, clearing his throat. You should eat something. I've got some supplies here, not much, but enough. Can you sit up? Grace pushed herself upright with effort, suddenly aware that she was wearing only her thin chemise beneath the blankets. Heat flooded her cheeks, and she clutched the blankets to her chest. Isaac, seeming to sense her discomfort, turned away, busying himself with preparations at the small stove in the corner. "Your dress and things are drying by the fire," he said, his back to her. "They were soaked through. I'm sorry, I had to remove them to get you warm. I tried to be respectful." "I understand," Grace said quickly. "You saved my life. There's nothing to apologize for." Isaac glanced back at her, something unreadable in his expression, then returned his attention to the stove. A few minutes later he brought her a plate with beans, a piece of hard bread, and some dried meat. It was simple fare, but to Grace it was a feast, and she ate with an appetite she had not felt in weeks, the warmth of the food spreading through her belly. Isaac ate his own meal at the table, giving her space, and they fell into a comfortable silence broken only by the crackle of the fire and the howl of the wind outside. When Grace finished, she set the plate aside and watched him, this stranger who had risked his life to save hers, who had carried her through miles of blizzard and asked nothing in return. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, wanting to fill the silence with something other than the storm. Isaac looked up, surprised. "Not much to tell," he said. "I run cattle, about 500 head right now, hoping to expand. Got 2,000 acres of good grazing land and a house I built myself 3 years ago. Few good men working for me, men I trust. It's a hard life, but it's mine, built it from nothing." "That's impressive," Grace said sincerely. "To build something like that takes dedication. Takes stubbornness more than anything," Isaac said with a slight smile, the first she had seen from him. "I grew up dirt poor, bouncing between orphanages and foster homes after my parents died when I was 8. Never had anything of my own, never had a place that belonged to me. I swore when I got old enough, I'd change that. I worked every job you can imagine, saved every penny, and when I had enough, I bought that land and never looked back." Grace heard the pride in his voice, but also something else, a loneliness that echoed her own. "Do you have family now? Anyone back at the ranch?" "Just my men," Isaac said. "Never married, never really had time for it. The ranch takes up most of my attention, and what little time I have left, I usually spend too tired to socialize much." He paused, his smile fading. "Gets lonely sometimes, if I'm being honest. That house is big and empty at night." Grace nodded, understanding more than he probably realized. "I know that feeling," she said softly. "Even when James was alive, I was lonely. He was always working, always chasing the next big strike, convinced he was going to find gold and make us rich. He loved me. I know he did, but the mind's the dream, that was what really had his heart. And now he's gone, and I'm more alone than ever." "You won't always be," Isaac said, his voice gentle. "You'll have your baby soon, and that's not nothing. You'll have someone who loves you, someone who needs you. If I can figure out how to take care of us both," Grace said, the worry creeping back in. "I don't have money, don't have a home, don't have a plan beyond hoping I can find work in Helena. What if I can't? What if I fail?" "You won't fail," Isaac said with such certainty that Grace almost believed him. "You survived a blizzard that should have killed you. You walked for days alone and pregnant. You're stronger than you think, Grace Emerson." Grace wanted to argue, to list all the ways she felt weak and inadequate, but exhaustion was pulling at her again, the warmth and the full stomach making her drowsy. Isaac seemed to notice, because he stood and moved to the fire, adding more wood. "Sleep," he said. "I'll take the floor." "You need the bed more than I do." "I can't take your bed," Grace protested. "This is your cabin, your space. I'll be fine on the floor." Isaac turned to look at her, his expression stern. "Grace, you're pregnant and you nearly died today. You're taking the bed, and that's final." I've slept on worse than a cabin floor, believe me." There was no arguing with that tone, and truthfully, Grace did not have the energy to try. She settled back against the pillow, pulling the blankets up to her chin, and watched as Isaac arranged blankets on the floor near the fire. He lay down, using his coat as a pillow, and within minutes his breathing had evened out into the rhythm of sleep. Grace lay awake longer, listening to the storm rage outside and the quiet sounds of Isaac sleeping, and for the first time in months, she felt something that might have been hope. The storm lasted 3 days, trapping them in the small cabin while the world outside disappeared beneath a blanket of white. On the second day, Grace was strong enough to get up and move around, and she insisted on helping with the simple chores, cooking meals and tidying the cabin despite Isaac's protests. It felt good to be useful, to contribute something rather than simply accepting his help. They talked during those 3 days, long conversations that ranged from childhood memories to dreams for the future, from favorite books to opinions on politics. Grace learned that Isaac was surprisingly well-read for a rancher, that he had taught himself from books he bought whenever he went to town. Hungry for knowledge he had been denied as an uneducated orphan. Isaac learned that Grace had been a teacher before she married James, that she loved Shakespeare and could recite whole sonnets from memory, that she played piano though she had not touched one in years. The conversations revealed deeper things too, shared wounds and shared longings. Isaac spoke of the loneliness of his life, the way success meant nothing when there was no one to share it with. Grace talked about her marriage, the love that had not been enough to fill the emptiness, the dream she had set aside to follow James to Virginia City. They were both orphans in their own way, both searching for something they could not quite name. On the third night, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Grace felt the baby kick hard, a sharp movement that made her gasp. Her hand flew to her belly and Isaac was at her side immediately, concern etched on his face. "What's wrong? Is it the baby? The baby's kicking," Grace said, half laughing. "Hard. Here, feel." She reached for his hand without thinking, pressing it against the curve of her belly. Isaac's eyes went wide as he felt the movement beneath his palm, the unmistakable push of a tiny foot or hand. "That's incredible," he breathed. "There's really a person in there." "There really is," Grace said, her voice soft. She looked at Isaac, at the wonder on his face, and something shifted between them, something that had been building over the past 3 days. The air felt charged, heavy with unspoken words, and Grace's heart began to beat faster. Isaac's eyes lifted from her belly to her face, and what she saw there made her breath catch. It was want, pure and undisguised, but tempered with something else, something that looked like reverence. His hand was still on her belly, warm and steady, and slowly, carefully, as if giving her time to pull away, he moved it to cup her cheek. "Grace," he said, his voice rough. "I should not be feeling what I'm feeling. We barely know each other. It's too soon, too fast. But I can't help it. These past 3 days, talking with you, being near you, it's been the best 3 days of my life. And I know you're grieving, I know you're dealing with so much, but I need you to know that when I look at you, I see everything I've been missing, everything I didn't know I wanted." Grace's eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of sadness. "I feel it too," she whispered. "And you're right, it's too soon, it doesn't make sense. I should be thinking about James, mourning him properly. But when I'm with you, Isaac, I feel alive in a way I haven't felt in so long. You make me feel safe and seen, and like maybe I have a future worth looking forward to." Isaac's thumb stroked her cheek, wiping away a tear that had escaped. "What do we do?" he asked. "How do we make sense of this?" "I don't know," Grace admitted, "but I don't want to ignore it. I don't want to pretend it isn't happening." "Neither do I," Isaac said. He leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to stop him, and when his lips met hers, it was gentle, questioning, a kiss that asked permission rather than demanded response. Grace answered by pressing into him, her hands coming up to tangle in his hair, and the kiss deepened, becoming something urgent and necessary, a connection that felt inevitable when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard. Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to court you properly, give you time to heal, to figure out what you really want. But Grace, I need you to know that what I want is you. You and your baby. I want to give you both a home, a family, a life, if you'll have me." Grace's tears fell freely now, but they were good tears, healing tears. "I want that too," she said. "More than I can say, but Isaac, I'm damaged goods. I'm pregnant with another man's child. I have nothing to offer you, no money, no property, nothing but problems and complications." "You're not damaged," Isaac said fiercely. "You're a survivor. You're strong and brave and beautiful, and that baby you're carrying is part of you, which means I already love them. As for money and property, I have enough for all of us. What I don't have is someone to share it with, someone to make that big empty house a home. Let me be that for you, Grace. Let me take care of you, both of you." "You barely know me," Grace said, but her resolve was weakening, her heart already reaching for what he offered. "Then let me get to know you better," Isaac said. "Give me a chance. That's all I'm asking." Grace looked into his eyes, those dark eyes that had been the first thing she saw when she woke from near death, and she made a decision that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll give you a chance. I'll give us a chance." Isaac's smile was brilliant, transforming his serious face into something almost boyish with joy. He kissed her again, softer this time, a kiss that tasted of promise and possibility, and Grace let herself believe, for the first time since James died, that she might actually have a future worth living. The storm broke the next morning, revealing a world transformed by snow, everything buried beneath drifts that reached higher than a man's head in places. Isaac spent the morning digging out the cabin door and checking on his horse, who had sheltered in the small lean-to attached to the cabin. The animal had weathered the storm well, and Isaac gave him extra feed and water, preparing for the journey back to the main ranch. Grace watched from the cabin doorway, wrapped in blankets against the cold, her heart both light and heavy. Light because of what had passed between her and Isaac, the promises made and the future suddenly bright. Heavy because she knew the real world waited beyond this small cabin, with all its complications and harsh realities, and she feared that what felt so right here might crumble when faced with the scrutiny of others. "Ready?" Isaac asked, leading the horse to the door. He had fashioned a kind of sling to carry Grace more comfortably, using blankets and rope to create a secure seat where she could ride in front of him, protected by his body and his coat. "Ready," Grace said, though her stomach fluttered with nerves. Isaac helped her onto the horse, settling her carefully before swinging up behind her. His arms came around her, holding the reins, and Grace leaned back against his chest, letting his strength steady her. The ride to the main ranch took most of the day, the snow making travel slow and treacherous. But Isaac navigated the terrain with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of his land, and gradually the landscape opened up, the endless white giving way to the shapes of buildings in the distance. Grace saw the ranch house first, a large, well-built structure of logs and stone that spoke of care and quality craftsmanship. Behind it stood a barn and several outbuildings, and beyond that, the land rolled away in gentle hills, perfect for grazing. "That's home," Isaac said softly in her ear. "What do you think?" "It's beautiful," Grace said honestly. "You built something wonderful here, Isaac." "It'll be even more wonderful with you in it," Isaac replied, and Grace felt warmth bloom in her chest despite the cold. As they rode into the yard, several men emerged from the barn, their faces showing surprise and curiosity at the sight of Isaac returning with a woman cradled in his arms. A tall man with graying hair stepped forward, his weathered face creasing with concern. "Boss," he said. "We were getting worried. That storm was a bad one." "Had to wait it out at the line cabin, Thomas," Isaac said, dismounting and then carefully lifting Grace down. "This is Grace Emerson. I found her collapsed in the snow during the blizzard. Grace, this is Thomas Walker, my foreman." Thomas tipped his hat, his eyes taking in Grace's condition with a quick, assessing glance. "Madam," he said respectfully, "glad the boss found you. That storm would have killed anyone caught out in it." "He saved my life," Grace said simply. "I owe him everything." "Isaac's good at that," Thomas said with a slight smile. "Saving things. Animals, people, lost causes. It's kind of his specialty." "That's enough, Thomas," Isaac said, but there was no heat in his words. "Grace needs to get inside and warm. Can you take care of the horse?" "Of course," Thomas said, taking the reins. The other men had drifted closer, and Isaac introduced them quickly. Young Billy, who could not have been more than 19, old Pete, who handled the horses, and Jack, a quiet man with watchful eyes. They all greeted Grace with polite nods, their curiosity obvious but their manners too good to ask the questions clearly burning in their minds. Isaac ushered Grace toward the house, his hand at the small of her back, protective and proprietary. The interior of the house was as impressive as the exterior, with a large main room dominated by a stone fireplace, solid furniture that looked handmade, and windows that let in generous light. It was clean but sparse, lacking the touches that made a house a home. No curtains on the windows, no rugs on the floor, no pictures on the walls. "I told you it was empty," Isaac said, seeing her look around. "I never bothered much with decoration. Didn't seem worth the effort when it was just me." "It has good bones," Grace said diplomatically. "It just needs some warmth, some life." "It needs you," Isaac said, turning her to face him. "Grace, I meant what I said at the cabin. I want you to stay here to make this your home. I know we need to take things slow, do this properly, but you're in no condition to travel to Helena, and even if you were, I don't want you going. Stay, please." Grace knew she should hesitate, should think it through, should worry about propriety and appearances. But the truth was, she had nowhere else to go, no other options, and more than that, she wanted to stay. She wanted to see where this thing with Isaac led, wanted to explore the feelings that had bloomed so unexpectedly in that small cabin. "What will people say?" she asked. "An unmarried pregnant woman living on your ranch. Let them talk," Isaac said firmly. "Anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with me. Besides, we'll have Thomas's wife Mary here as a chaperone. She usually comes by a few times a week to cook and clean. I'll ask her to stay on full time for a while. Would that make you more comfortable?" The fact that he thought of her reputation, her comfort, made Grace's heart swell. "Yes," she said. "That would help. And Isaac, I'll earn my keep. I can cook, clean, help with the household accounts, whatever you need. I won't be a charity case." "You're not charity," Isaac said, cupping her face in his hands. "You're the woman I'm courting, the woman I hope will agree to marry me someday. And until that day comes, you're my guest, and you'll let me take care of you without arguing about earning your keep." "Stubborn man," Grace said, but she was smiling. "You haven't seen stubborn yet," Isaac replied, then kissed her softly. "Now let me show you to your room. You should rest." He led her upstairs to a bedroom that was clearly the best in the house, with a large bed, a wardrobe, and windows overlooking the front yard. "This is yours," he said. "I'll take one of the other rooms." Mary can bring you some clothes tomorrow, and we'll get whatever else you need from town as soon as the road's clear." Grace looked around the room, emotions overwhelming her. 3 days ago she had been dying in the snow, certain her life was over. Now she stood in a beautiful house with a good man offering her a future she had not dared to imagine. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "Yes, you do," Isaac said firmly. "You deserve every good thing, Grace, and I'm going to spend as long as it takes convincing you of that." Mary Walker arrived the next morning, a plump, cheerful woman in her 40s who swept into the house with a basket of food and an armload of clothes. She took one look at Grace and immediately enfolded her in a warm hug that nearly brought Grace to tears. "You poor dear," Mary said. "Thomas told me what happened. What a terrifying ordeal. But you're safe now, and we'll take good care of you." Mary proved as good as her word, fussing over Grace with maternal efficiency, feeding her hearty meals and insisting she rest. But more than that, Mary provided companionship, filling the hours with cheerful chatter and stories about the ranch and the people who worked there. Through Mary, Grace learned more about Isaac, how he had arrived in Montana Territory 6 years ago with nothing but a horse and his determination. How he had worked as a ranch hand for others until he saved enough to buy his own land. How he was known throughout the region as a fair man who treated his workers well and kept his word. "He's a good man, our Isaac," Mary said one afternoon as she and Grace sat in the kitchen peeling potatoes. "But lonely. I've been hoping for years he'd find someone, settle down properly. He needs a family, that one. He's got too much love in him to waste it on just cattle and land." Grace felt her cheeks heat. "Mary, it's not like that. I mean, it is, but it's complicated. We barely know each other." "Sometimes knowing happens fast," Mary said wisely. "I knew Thomas was the man for me within a week of meeting him, and we've been married 23 years come June. When it's right, and don't let anyone tell you different." "I'm pregnant with another man's child," Grace said quietly. "Doesn't that matter? Does it matter to Isaac?" Mary asked. Grace thought of the way Isaac had felt the baby kick, the wonder on his face, the way he had said he already loved the child because they were part of her. "No," she said. "He says it doesn't matter at all." "Then it doesn't matter," Mary said firmly. "The only opinions that count are yours and his. Everyone else can mind their own business." As the days passed and Grace regained her strength, she fell into a routine on the ranch. She helped Mary with the cooking and cleaning, though both women insisted she not overexert herself. She spent time with Isaac every evening after he came in from working the land, sitting by the fire and talking, learning more about each other with every conversation. He told her about his childhood in the orphanage, the hunger and the cold, and the constant feeling of being unwanted. She told him about her parents, both dead now, and the teaching position she had loved and given up when James convinced her that marriage meant following him wherever his dreams led. "You regret it?" Isaac asked one night. "Giving up teaching?" Grace considered the question carefully. "I regret that I didn't fight harder to keep some part of myself," she said. "I loved James, but I lost Grace Emerson when I became Mrs. James Emerson. I became what he needed, what he wanted, and I forgot to be what I needed. I won't make that mistake again." "I wouldn't want you to," Isaac said seriously. "I fell for Grace Emerson, not some version of yourself you think I want. Be who you are always. That's all I ask." Conversations like that, deep and honest, built something between them stronger than simple attraction. Grace found herself falling for Isaac not just because he had saved her life, but because of who he was: kind, thoughtful, hardworking, and genuine in a way James never had been. James had been a dreamer, always chasing something just over the horizon. Isaac was a builder, creating something solid and real with his own hands. 6 weeks after Isaac had found her in the snow, as February gave way to March, and the worst of the winter weather began to ease, Grace stood in the kitchen one morning and felt a different kind of pain in her belly, a tightening that came and went in waves. She recognized it immediately, had been expecting it for weeks now. The baby was coming. "Mary," she called, keeping her voice steady despite the fear that wanted to creep in. "I need you to fetch Isaac. It's time." Mary's eyes went wide, but she moved with practiced efficiency, sending Billy running to find Isaac in the south pasture. She helped Grace upstairs to her bedroom and got her settled, all the while maintaining a stream of reassuring chatter. "First babies take their time," she said. "You'll be hours yet, most like. Nothing to worry about. Breathe through the pains when they come and rest between. I've birthed 3 of my own and helped with dozens more. You're in good hands." Isaac burst into the room 20 minutes later, his face pale beneath his tan. "Grace," he said, crossing to the bed in 3 long strides. "Mary said the baby's coming. Are you all right? What can I do?" "I'm fine," Grace said, managing a smile despite another contraction. "Babies come when they're ready. There's not much to do but wait." "I'm staying," Isaac said firmly. "Right here, I'm not leaving you." "Isaac, this is woman's work," Mary protested. "It's not proper for you to be here." "I don't care about proper," Isaac said, taking Grace's hand. "If Grace wants me to stay, I'm staying." Grace squeezed his hand, grateful beyond words. "Stay," she said. "Please." Mary shook her head but did not argue further. And as the hours passed and the contractions grew stronger and closer together, Isaac remained at Grace's side, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement when the pain became intense. Grace had never imagined having a man present for childbirth. But Isaac's presence was a comfort rather than an embarrassment, his steady strength something to hold onto when everything else felt out of control. The birth was long and difficult, and there were moments when Grace thought she could not endure another second, could not push any harder, could not survive the tearing agony of it. But Isaac was there, his voice in her ear, reminding her how strong she was, how she had survived the blizzard and would survive this, how she could do anything. When the baby finally came, sliding into Mary's waiting hands with a lusty wail that filled the room, Grace collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted beyond measure but flooded with relief and joy so intense it felt like drowning. "It's a boy," Mary announced, beaming. "A healthy, perfect baby boy." She cleaned the infant quickly and wrapped him in soft blankets, then placed him in Grace's arms. Grace looked down at her son, at his tiny red face and shock of dark hair, and felt something shift fundamentally in her heart. This was her child, the piece of James she would always carry, but also something entirely new, entirely his own. "He's beautiful," Isaac said softly, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out tentatively and Grace shifted the baby so Isaac could touch him, run one gentle finger down the soft cheek. The baby turned toward the touch, mouth working, and Isaac laughed, the sound slightly choked. "Look at him. He's perfect, Grace." "Do you want to hold him?" Grace asked. Isaac looked startled, almost frightened. "I've never held a baby," he admitted. "What if I drop him?" "You won't drop him," Grace said. "Trust me." Carefully, awkwardly, Isaac took the baby, cradling him against his chest with the kind of reverence usually reserved for holy objects. The baby settled immediately, seeming to sense safety, and Isaac's expression transformed into something Grace would remember for the rest of her life: pure, unguarded love. "Hello," Isaac whispered to the child. "Hello, little one. I'm Isaac. I'm going to help your mama take care of you if that's all right with you." Grace felt tears slide down her cheeks, good tears that tasted of joy. "His name is Gabriel," she said, making the decision in that moment. Gabriel James Emerson. Gabriel, Isaac repeated, smiling. That's a good, strong name. Hello, Gabriel. Welcome to the world. Mary bustled around, cleaning up and getting Grace settled more comfortably, and eventually convinced Isaac to surrender the baby so Grace could try to nurse him. It took some fumbling, some frustration, but eventually Gabriel latched on and began to feed, his tiny hand curled against Grace's breast. Isaac sat beside the bed, watching them with an expression of such contentment that Grace's heart ached. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" Grace asked. "For letting me be here. For letting me be part of this. I know he's not mine by blood, but Grace, looking at him, being here for his birth, I feel like he's mine in every way that matters." "He is yours," Grace said, the words coming from somewhere deep and true. "If you want him, if you want us." Isaac leaned forward and kissed her forehead, then kissed Gabriel's dark hair. "I want you both," he said, "more than I've ever wanted anything. Marry me, Grace, make it official. Be my wife, let me be Gabriel's father, let us be a family." Grace had known the proposal was coming, had been expecting it for weeks now, but hearing the words still made her breath catch. This was what she wanted, what she had hoped for, but doubt crept in at the edges. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Really sure? This is a big decision, Isaac. You're talking about taking on a ready-made family, raising another man's child." "Gabriel is your child, which makes him mine," Isaac said firmly. "And yes, I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything. I love you, Grace Emerson. I've loved you since I found you in that snow, since those 3 days in the cabin when I got to know your heart. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, raising Gabriel together, maybe adding more children if we're blessed. I want to grow old with you, build a life with you. Say yes." Grace looked at him, this man who had saved her life and then stolen her heart, who held her newborn son like he was precious and breakable and worth protecting with everything he had. She thought of James, of the love she had felt for him, and knew it was different from what she felt for Isaac. What she felt for Isaac was deeper, steadier, more real. James had been her first love, young love, the kind that burned bright and fast. Isaac was the love that would last, the kind you built a life on. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and sure. "Yes, I'll marry you." Isaac's smile was brilliant and he kissed her again, careful not to disturb Gabriel, pouring everything he felt into that kiss. When they broke apart, Mary was crying happy tears, and even crusty old Thomas, who had come upstairs to check on things, had a suspicious sheen to his eyes. "About time," Thomas muttered. "Been like watching two lovesick calves moon around each other for weeks." "Oh, hush," Mary said, swatting his arm. "It's romantic." They were married 3 weeks later, as soon as Grace was recovered enough from the birth. It was a simple ceremony, performed by the circuit preacher when he came through the area, with Mary and Thomas standing as witnesses, and the ranch hands gathered round. Grace wore a dress Mary had helped her alter, pale blue calico that complemented her eyes, and Isaac wore his Sunday best, his hair freshly cut, his face clean-shaven. The preacher spoke the traditional words, and when he asked if Isaac would take Grace to be his lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, Isaac's "I do" rang out strong and clear. When Grace spoke her own vows, looking into Isaac's dark eyes and seeing her whole future there, her voice was steady, certain. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher said. "You may kiss your bride." Isaac pulled Grace close and kissed her deeply, and the small gathering erupted in cheers and applause. Gabriel, strapped to Mary's chest in a sling she had made, let out a wail as if adding his own congratulations, and everyone laughed. That night, after the celebration dinner Mary had prepared and the well wishes from everyone on the ranch, Isaac carried Grace over the threshold of the bedroom they would now share. His bedroom transformed with the touches Grace had added over the past week's curtains on the windows, a quilt on the bed, wildflowers in a vase on the dresser. He set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands, his expression serious. "I know it's been a short time since the birth," he said, "and I don't want to rush you or make you uncomfortable. We can take this as slow as you need." Grace smiled, touched by his consideration. "Isaac," she said softly, "I'm your wife now, and while you're right that it's too soon for certain things, I want to be close to you. I want to sleep in your arms, wake up beside you. That's enough for now." Relief crossed Isaac's face and he kissed her tenderly. "More than enough," he agreed. They undressed shyly, despite everything they had already shared, and climbed into bed together. Isaac pulled Grace against his chest, her back to his front, his arm draped over her waist, protective and possessive. Grace felt safe in a way she had never felt before, cherished and wanted and home. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Isaac replied, his breath warm against her hair. "My wife, my family, everything I ever wanted." The months that followed were the happiest of Grace's life. Spring came to Montana, transforming the white landscape into green, rolling hills dotted with wildflowers. Gabriel grew fat and healthy, his dark eyes alert and curious, his smile quick and frequent. He adored Isaac, reaching for him whenever Isaac came near, gurgling happily when Isaac held him and walked him around the ranch. Isaac proved to be a natural father, patient and gentle with Gabriel in a way that made Grace fall even more deeply in love with him. He fashioned a cradle with his own hands, carving horses and cattle into the wood, and spent hours rocking Gabriel to sleep when the baby was fussy. He talked to Gabriel constantly, telling him about the ranch, the cattle, the land, as if the baby could understand every word. Grace threw herself into making the house a home, sewing curtains for every window, braiding rugs for the floors, planting a garden behind the house where she grew vegetables and herbs. She cooked for the ranch hands, big hearty meals that earned her their devotion, and she helped Isaac with the ranch accounts, her teaching background making her quick with numbers and organization. In the evenings, after Gabriel was asleep in his cradle and the work of the day was done, Grace and Isaac would sit together on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains, talking about everything and nothing. These were Grace's favorite times, when Isaac would tell her about his day, and she would share her own small adventures, when they would make plans for the future and dream together. "I want to expand the herd," Isaac said one evening in early summer. "Maybe buy another 1,000 acres to the west. Thomas thinks we can support at least 1,000 head if we do it right." "That's ambitious," Grace said, leaning against his shoulder, "but I believe you can do it. You've already accomplished so much." "We've accomplished," Isaac corrected. "You're part of this now, Grace. This ranch, it's ours together. Your ideas, your work, it all matters. Don't ever forget that." "I won't," Grace promised. She paused, then added, "Isaac, there's something I need to tell you." Something in her tone made Isaac turn to look at her, concern creasing his brow. "What is it?" "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Grace assured him quickly. "Better than fine, actually. I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." Isaac stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, and Grace felt a flicker of nervousness. They had not discussed having more children, had not talked about expanding their family so soon. Then Isaac's face broke into the widest smile Grace had ever seen, and he let out a whoop of joy that probably woke Gabriel inside the house. He swept Grace into his arms, spinning her around, laughing like a child. "We're having a baby," he repeated, setting her down and kissing her soundly. "Our baby, yours and mine. Grace, that's wonderful. That's the best news I've ever heard." "You're happy?" Grace asked, laughing at his enthusiasm. Happy doesn't begin to cover it, Isaac said. I'm ecstatic, I'm overjoyed, I'm the luckiest man in Montana. When? When is the baby coming? Early spring, I think, Grace said. March or April. Isaac placed his hand on her still, flat belly, his expression turning reverent. Hello in there, he said softly. I can't wait to meet you. Grace covered his hand with hers, emotion welling up. This baby, unlike Gabriel, would be theirs from the start, created from their love, a symbol of everything they had built together. I love you, she said. I love you more, Isaac replied, pulling her close. Thank you, Grace. Thank you for giving me everything I never knew I wanted. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and as fall came and the leaves turned gold and red, Grace's belly swelled with new life. Gabriel, now crawling and pulling himself up on furniture, seemed fascinated by his mother's changing shape. Patting her belly gently as if he understood a brother or sister grew inside. Isaac was attentive to the point of being overprotective, insisting Grace rest more and work less, hovering whenever she so much as looked tired. It was both endearing and exasperating, and Grace had to remind him regularly that she was pregnant, not ill. I just worry, Isaac admitted one afternoon when Grace had scolded him for trying to carry a basket of laundry she was perfectly capable of handling. I wasn't there for you with Gabriel, not from the beginning. I want to do everything right this time. You were there when it mattered, Grace said, softening. And you've been Gabriel's father in every way that counts, but Isaac, you have to trust me to know my own limits. I'm not fragile. I know you're not fragile, Isaac said. You're the strongest person I know. But that doesn't mean I can't want to take care of you. They compromised, Grace agreeing to rest more and accept help with the heavier tasks, Isaac agreeing to trust her judgment and not treat her like she was made of glass. It was a balance they found together, like everything else in their marriage, negotiating and adjusting until they found what worked. Winter came early that year, snow falling in November and continuing through December. On Christmas morning, with the house decorated with pine boughs and the smell of roasting turkey filling the air, Isaac gave Grace a gift that made her cry, a piano, shipped all the way from Denver at great expense and effort. You said you missed playing, Isaac explained as Grace ran her fingers over the polished wood, too overcome to speak. I wanted to give you back something you loved, something you gave up. Merry Christmas, Grace. Grace played carols that day, her fingers rusty but memory guiding her through songs she had not performed in years. Gabriel banged enthusiastically on the keys beside her, and Isaac sat nearby, watching with an expression of pure contentment. It was, Grace thought, the perfect Christmas, complete in every way. The baby came in late March on a day when early spring flowers were just beginning to poke through the melting snow. This birth was faster than Gabriel's had been, only 6 hours from first pain to final push, and Isaac was there again, holding Grace's hand, talking her through it. When the baby emerged, squalling and red-faced, Mary announced, "It's a girl, a beautiful baby girl." Isaac cut the cord with hands that shook slightly, then watched as Mary cleaned their daughter and wrapped her in a soft pink blanket. When she was placed in Grace's arms, both parents stared in wonder at the tiny person they had created, perfect from her dark hair to her minuscule toes. She has your nose, Grace said, touching the baby's face gently. And your eyes, Isaac replied, noting the slate-blue gaze that would probably change color in time. She's beautiful, Grace, just like her mother. What should we name her? Grace asked. Isaac considered, then smiled. What about hope? Because that's what you gave me when I found you in the snow, hope for a future I didn't know was possible. Hope, Grace repeated, testing the name. Hope Elizabeth Norton, I like it, it's perfect. They brought Gabriel in to meet his sister, the toddler curious but gentle, reaching out to touch Hope's hand with one chubby finger. "Baby," he said clearly, one of his few words, and Grace and Isaac exchanged delighted glances. "That's right," Isaac said, picking Gabriel up and holding him so he could see better. "That's your little sister, Hope. You're a big brother now, Gabriel. You have to help us take care of her." Gabriel studied Hope seriously, then leaned forward and planted a wet kiss on her forehead. "Baby," he said again, satisfied, and everyone laughed. The ranch continued to thrive as the children grew. Isaac expanded the herd as he had planned, buying more land and more cattle, and the Norton Ranch became known throughout the territory as one of the best-run operations around. Grace managed the household and the books, raised the children, and occasionally taught lessons to the ranch hands' children who lived on the property, finding joy in returning to her old profession, even in this small way. When Gabriel was 5 and Hope was 2, Grace found herself pregnant again, and this time when she told Isaac, he simply pulled her close and held her for a long time, his face buried in her hair. "Every time you tell me we're having another baby, it feels like the first time," he said. "Like a miracle I don't deserve but am grateful for anyway." This baby came in winter, a boy they named Samuel Isaac Norton, born during a snowstorm that reminded Grace of the day Isaac had found her. She held her newborn son and looked at her husband, at the man who had carried her through miles of snow and told her to rest, that she was safe, and she marveled at how that one terrible, wonderful day had led to this life, this family, this love. The years passed in a blur of busy, happy days. Gabriel grew tall and serious, following Isaac around the ranch from the time he could walk, learning everything his father could teach him about cattle and land and honest work. Hope was bright and curious, always asking questions, always wanting to know how things worked. Samuel was the gentle one, sweet-natured and affectionate, quick to laugh and slow to anger. Grace and Isaac added 2 more children to their family, another girl named Faith, and a final boy they called John, and the big house that had once been so empty rang constantly with noise and life. Meals were chaotic affairs with 5 children, homework and chores and constant activity, but Grace would not have traded it for anything. On their 10th anniversary, Isaac took Grace riding up into the hills, just the 2 of them, leaving the children in Mary's capable hands for the afternoon. They stopped at the site where the line cabin had stood before Isaac had torn it down and rebuilt it larger. "Do you ever think about that storm?" Isaac asked, his arm around Grace's waist as they stood looking out over the land. "About how differently things could have gone?" "All the time," Grace admitted. "If you had not found me, if you had turned back even 5 minutes earlier, I would have died in that snow. Gabriel would have died. We would not have this life, these children, this love." "I think about it too," Isaac said quietly. "And I thank God every day that I didn't turn back, that I saw you, that I was given the chance to know you, to love you. You saved me as much as I saved you, Grace. I was just existing before you, going through the motions. You gave me a reason to live, a purpose beyond just building wealth. You gave me a family." Grace turned in his arms, looking up at the man she loved more with each passing year. His face had a few more lines now, and there was silver at his temples, but to her he was as handsome as the day she had first opened her eyes and seen him. "We saved each other," she said. "That's what love does. It saves us from loneliness, from emptiness, from lives half-lived. I was so lost when you found me, Isaac, lost in more ways than just physically. And you did not just carry me to safety that day. You carried me back to life." Isaac kissed her then, deep and tender, a kiss that held 10 years of love and commitment and shared life. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers, his hands cupping her face. I would carry you to the end of the world if you needed me to, he said. Every day, every step for the rest of my life. That's what you mean to me. And you to me, Grace replied. Always. They stood there a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the sun set over the land they had built into something magnificent together. Below them, the ranch spread out, neat and prosperous, and beyond that, the mountains rose against the sky, eternal and beautiful. It was a good life, a blessed life, built from the ashes of tragedy and the gift of second chances. When they finally rode back down to the house, the children ran out to meet them. Gabriel, now a young man of 15, Hope, a spirited girl of 12, and the younger three tumbling behind. Isaac swung down from his horse and caught Faith as she launched herself at him, while Grace dismounted more carefully, reaching for John. "Did you have a good ride?" Gabriel asked, taking the reins of both horses to lead them to the barn. "The best," Isaac said, his eyes meeting Grace's over the children's heads. "Absolutely the best." That night, after the children were all in bed and the house was quiet, Grace and Isaac lay together in their room, the same room where they had spent their wedding night 10 years before. So much had changed, and yet the fundamental truth remained the same: they loved each other, had built a life together, had created something beautiful and lasting from a chance meeting in a snowstorm. "No regrets?" Isaac asked softly, his hand tracing patterns on Grace's shoulder. "Not a single one," Grace said. "You?" "Only that I didn't find you sooner," Isaac replied, "that we didn't have even more time together." "We have all the time we need," Grace said. "A lifetime, Isaac. That's what you promised me, and that's what I'm holding you to." "A lifetime it is," Isaac agreed, pulling her closer. "And beyond that, if there's anything after, wherever you go, I'll follow. Whatever comes, we face it together." "Together," Grace echoed, and in that word was everything: promise and vow, commitment and love, the binding of two souls who had found each other against impossible odds and chosen every day to keep choosing each other. The years continued to unfold, bringing challenges and triumphs in equal measure. The ranch weathered droughts and harsh winters, and there were years when the cattle prices fell and money was tight. But Isaac and Grace faced it all together, their partnership stronger than any obstacle. Gabriel took over more and more responsibility on the ranch as he grew older, showing himself to be as capable and hardworking as his father. Hope discovered a talent for drawing and filled the house with sketches of horses and cattle, and the Montana landscape. Samuel proved to have a gift with animals, gentling even the wildest horses with patience and soft words. When Gabriel turned 21, he married a girl from town, a sweet-natured young woman named Anna who fit seamlessly into the Norton family. Their wedding was a grand affair, held at the ranch with half the territory in attendance. And when Grace watched her eldest son pledge his life to another person, she thought of her own wedding, simple and small, and felt profound gratitude for all that had come from that day. Gabriel and Anna built a house on the edge of the ranch property, and within a year they had a baby of their own, a boy they named Isaac James after both his grandfathers. Grace held her grandson for the first time and marveled at the circle of life, at how she had once been the pregnant widow collapsed in the snow. And now she was a grandmother with a family that stretched across generations. Isaac, holding his grandson and watching Gabriel with his new family, was quieter than usual that evening. When Grace asked him what he was thinking, he smiled, but there was something bittersweet in his expression. "I'm thinking about how fast it all goes," he said. "It seems like yesterday I was finding you in that snow, and now we're grandparents. Where did the time go, Grace?" "Into a life well lived," Grace said, taking his free hand. "Into children raised and love shared and memories made. That's where the time went, and I wouldn't change a single moment." "Neither would I," Isaac agreed. "But I'm not ready for it to be over. I want more time with you, more years, more everything." "Then we'll take every day we're given," Grace said. "And we'll make the most of each one. That's all anyone can do." They continued to do exactly that, living fully and gratefully, watching as their other children grew and found their own paths. Hope moved to Helena and opened a shop selling her art, achieving a success that made her parents burst with pride. Samuel took over the day-to-day management of the horse program on the ranch, building it into something renowned throughout Montana. Faith married a doctor and moved to Butte, returning often with stories of city life that fascinated and horrified her rural family in equal measure. John, the baby, surprised everyone by declaring his intention to become a lawyer, and Isaac paid for him to go back east to school, determined to give his children opportunities he had never had. Through it all, Grace and Isaac remained the center, the foundation upon which the family was built. They celebrated birthdays and holidays, christenings and weddings, welcomed new grandchildren as the years brought more. The Norton family grew into something of a dynasty in the territory, known for their success and their integrity, for the way they treated people fairly and lived according to their principles. On their 25th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration that lasted 3 days. Gabriel and Anna were there with their 4 children. Hope came from Helena with her husband and 2 daughters. Samuel brought his new bride. Faith arrived from Butte with her doctor husband and their 3 boys. And John returned from his law studies back east with tales of a whole different world. The house overflowed with people, noise, laughter, and love, and Grace stood in the middle of it, all feeling overwhelmed by how blessed she was. Isaac found her standing alone on the porch on the second evening, watching the children play in the yard while the adults visited inside. He slipped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest, and they stood there in comfortable silence. "Are you happy?" he asked finally. Grace turned to look at him, at the man who had carried her through the snow 25 years ago, who had loved her through joy and sorrow, who had given her everything she never knew she needed. His hair was more silver than brown now, and lines creased his face, but his eyes were the same, dark and steady and filled with love when they looked at her. "Happy doesn't seem like a big enough word," she said. "I'm content. I'm fulfilled. I'm grateful beyond measure." "Isaac, when I think of that day you found me, when I was so certain my life was over, and I look at all of this, at everything we built, I can hardly believe it's real. You gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined." "We gave each other a life," Isaac corrected gently. "I was as lost as you were, Grace, just in a different way. You made my success mean something. You turned a house into a home and a lonely man into a husband and father. Without you, all of this," he gestured to the ranch the family gathered inside, "would be meaningless. You're my everything. You always have been." Grace felt tears slip down her cheeks, happy tears that came more easily with age. "I love you," she said. "As much now as I did the day I married you. More, maybe, because now I know what we're capable of together. I know the life we can build." "I love you too," Isaac said. "More than I have words to express. You're my wife, my partner, the mother of my children, and my best friend. You're the reason I wake up grateful every morning. Thank you, Grace, for saying yes that day. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy with more hope than sense." "Best decision I ever made," Grace said, then kissed him, pouring 25 years of love into that kiss, promising another 25 if they were blessed enough to have them. The years continued their steady march. Gabriel took over running the ranch as Isaac aged, though Isaac remained active and involved until his body simply would not cooperate anymore. Grace continued to be the heart of the family, the one everyone came to with their problems and their triumphs, the one who held everyone together with her quiet strength and endless love. On a spring morning much like the one when Hope was born, when Grace was 68 years old and Isaac was 70, Grace woke to find Isaac looking at her with an expression that made her heart clench. "What's wrong?" she asked, reaching for him. "Nothing's wrong," Isaac said, but his voice was rough. "I was just lying here thinking about how many mornings I've woken up next to you and how each one is a gift. And I was thinking about that first morning you woke up in the line cabin, when I thought I'd lost you before I ever really found you, and how grateful I am that didn't happen, that we got all this time together." Grace heard something in his voice, something that sounded like goodbye, and fear clutched at her. "Isaac, what is it? Are you ill? What haven't you told me?" "I'm fine," Isaac assured her, pulling her close. "I'm just feeling sentimental, I suppose. Getting old makes you think about mortality, about how much time is left. And I want you to know, Grace, that if I died tomorrow, I would die the happiest man who ever lived. You gave me everything. Never doubt that." "You're not dying tomorrow," Grace said fiercely. "We have years left, Isaac Norton. I'm not finished with you yet." Isaac laughed softly. "Then I guess I better stick around. Can't disappoint my wife after all." They did have years left, though not as many as Grace wanted. They had 10 more good years. Years of grandchildren and great-grandchildren, of quiet days and family gatherings, of sitting together on the porch and watching the sunset over land they had built into something magnificent. They had time to say everything that needed saying, to make peace with the life they had lived and the legacy they would leave. When Isaac died at 80, peacefully in his sleep with Grace beside him, the entire territory mourned. The church in Helena could not hold everyone who came to pay respects to the man who had built an empire through hard work and fair dealing, who had raised a family that was a credit to him, who had loved his wife with a devotion that became legendary. Grace stood at the graveside, supported by Gabriel on one side and Hope on the other, and watched as they lowered Isaac into the ground. She did not cry, having shed all her tears in private, and instead she felt a strange sense of peace. Isaac had lived a full, rich life. He had died knowing he was loved, surrounded by family, with no regrets. How many people could say the same? After the funeral, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Grace walked up into the hills to the place where the line cabin had once stood. She stood there in the fading light, remembering a day 48 years earlier when a cowboy had found a pregnant widow collapsed in the snow and changed both their lives forever. "Rest now," she whispered to the wind, knowing Isaac could hear her wherever he was. "You're safe. Just like you told me all those years ago. Rest now, my love. You're safe, and I'll be along soon enough to find you again." Grace lived another 5 years, long enough to see her youngest great-grandchild born, long enough to know that the Norton legacy would continue for generations. She died at 73, quietly in her sleep just as Isaac had, and they buried her beside him on a hill overlooking the ranch. The gravestone was simple but profound. Isaac Norton and Grace Emerson Norton. He saved her from the snow, and she saved him from loneliness. Together they built a life of love. Gabriel, now an old man himself, stood at his parents' grave with his own children and grandchildren around him, and he told them the story he had heard 1,000 times, the story that had become family legend. He told them about the pregnant widow collapsed in the snow, and the cowboy who carried her miles through a blizzard and told her to rest, that she was safe. He told them how that single act of compassion had grown into a love that spanned decades, had created a family that numbered in the dozens, had built a legacy that would last for generations. "That's what love does," Gabriel said. looking at the young faces gathered around him. It saves us. It transforms us. It creates something beautiful from nothing. Your grandmother and grandfather, they showed us that. They showed us that one moment, one choice, one act of kindness can change everything. Remember that. Live by it. Pass it on. And they did. The story of Isaac and Grace became a Norton family treasure, told and retold, embellished and preserved. The ranch continued for another 100 years, and even when it was finally sold and the land divided, the story remained, a testament to a love that had defied the odds, that had survived tragedy and hardship, that had built something lasting and beautiful from a chance encounter in a Montana blizzard. Years later, when descendants of Isaac and Grace would visit the area and look at old photographs, they would see a tall, serious man and a gentle woman with kind eyes, and they would know they were looking at the foundation of their family, at two people who had loved each other so completely that the effects of that love rippled forward through time, touching lives that would never know them directly but would be forever shaped by them. It was a love story for the ages, simple and profound, the kind that reminded people what really mattered in life. Not wealth or success or fame, but connection, devotion, the choice to love someone fully and completely, to build a life together through good times and bad, to create something that would outlast your time on earth. And it all started with a cowboy finding a pregnant widow collapsed in the snow, carrying her miles through a killing storm, and telling her words that would echo through generations. Rest now. You're safe. She was safe. They both were. And from that safety, that security, that love, grew something magnificent that would never truly die as long as someone remembered their story and passed it on. The end.